Live from the camera store. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm going to be your host tonight for Capture One Photo Editing Essentials. And we have some special guests that I'm going to introduce shortly. But first of all, I want to send a big thank you to Capture One for sponsoring tonight's event. And we actually have Liz from Capture One with us tonight who can answer your Capture One questions in the chat. And we also want to let you know that they have organized a special promo just in time for this event that's going to run until June 19th. And so you can save 40% off on the Capture One Pro 23, which is a perpetual license. You get to keep it. So I'm going to have Liz actually pop on here with me right now and just share a few words about that.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And Evelyn in the camera store, thank you for hosting us. And Joe, I want to thank you for joining us. So we do have a really amazing promotion going on this evening. So the regular price is $419 Canadian dollars, and we will have it available for 40%. So I think that's $249 Canadian dollars, and it is a perpetual license. So it is the latest version of Capture One. You would own it. It's a one-time payment for the latest version of Capture One. So it's a great deal. It's good for one user up to 3 different devices. So if you've been thinking about using Capture One, now's a great time. We will go ahead and drop the link in the chat to purchase Capture One if you're interested. But other than that, I just wanted to share that with you guys, and I'll hand it back over to you, Evelyn.
Thanks, Liz. So I mentioned that there's a lot of work happening behind the scenes tonight to make all this happen. Hopefully it goes on without a hitch. Now tonight we have our TCSTV live dream team, and that includes Jeff and Brett working behind the scenes. So thanks so much to them. And if you've registered for this event, I will send you some information about that promo from Capture One, as well as a survey about the event. So please watch out for that. And if you're just joining us now on YouTube and you would like to get that email, you can contact me at evelyn@thecamerastore.com, and I'll make sure I send that to you directly. But part of what I love most about live streams is being able to interact with all of you. So we hope that you ask questions throughout. We are going to do an official Q&A at the end of the seminar, and so make sure you put all those questions in as you think of them, and then we'll compile them and do a Q&A at the end. So if you're not already familiar with our guest tonight, we have Joe Klocek, who's worked with the photographic industry as a photographer, salesman, and instructor since 2005. And in 2017, he founded the F Stops Here so he could focus on making professional quality photography available to every enthusiast. In the pursuit of this goal, he's created several products, written 7 books, and teaches courses on a variety of topics, and we're lucky to have him tonight. And in the past few years, he's been a guest speaker for all kinds of photographic societies and travel expos, and he lives in Denver with his wife, son, and an imaginable book collection. And we were just talking before we went live that I'm sitting in our book nook, and so we can relate on the book topic. But welcome, Joe. Thanks for joining us on TCSTV.
Oh, thank you very, very much for having me. I'm really, really happy to be here, so thanks again. Ready for me to kick it off?
Yeah, you can get right into it.
If you would be able to get the link for everybody.
Absolutely.
What we're going to get to everybody here is I put together an outline for everything that I'm talking about tonight so that you have some reference material that will allow you to go back and be able to look at some of the things that I'm talking about tonight in your own time later on. Let's go ahead and do a screen share. Here, double check me. You should be seeing Capture One off of my screen. Is that correct?
Looks great. Yeah, I see a nice owl photograph there.
Yeah, awesome.
Good.
So I want to tell everyone what I'm doing. We've got an hour tonight, and obviously you can't even begin to talk about everything with a software, especially one as powerful as Capture One, in an hour. So I wanted to do things that introduced what it's like to really work with this software as your primary editor. And there's 3 major topics I want to make sure that I discuss as you get into working with this and enjoying using it. The first is understanding workspaces, that the way that you interact with Capture One is entirely manageable and customizable, and I want you to see that in process. It's one of my favorite aspects of working with the software. Secondly, I want to take a look at how we actually organize images within Capture One, not on your hard disk, that's a different conversation, but within Capture One, and how we can make it easy to find the things that you are looking for. And then lastly, I want to look briefly at an easy way to set up a kind of fast edit panel. We're going to use something called the Quick Tool tab, and I'm going to show you how I like to customize it. Everybody's different. You might do it differently, but I want to show you that so that we can build something that lets you run in a very fast, streamlined manner through an edit of an image A to Z. And so that's kind of where we're headed. And I want to start with workspace and introduce a couple terms to you here and introduce how we manage the way that this looks. And I have highlighted my cursor, so you should be able to see it pretty well. But over here, we have what is known as the browser, and of course that's where we are looking at our images. This is from a Birds of Prey event that I do here in Denver. Over here we have what are called the tools and the tool tabs. And here's something that might be different about Capture One than other softwares you might have worked with. There's no such thing as different modes, an editing mode as opposed to an organizational mode. It's all one workspace. And so we divide up the tools that you have access to into kind of themed things that are called tool tabs right up here at the top. And these are, of course, like everything else, fully customizable. And I want to show you working with that. So tool tabs are organizations of tools. An individual tool is anything that Capture One can do. So for instance, right here I have the exposure tool, and I can brighten an image or darken an image or whatever. That's what the tool does. But importantly, that's a tool, and I have it organized within a tool tab. Now, at the top, we have what's called the toolbar, which that can be a little bit confusing that the terms are very similar. But these are fast click types of tools that allow you to quickly look at or check something, or maybe modify the way you interact with the software. And I want to show you organizing and managing this, because what you're looking at here is the default workspace. Now, a workspace is simply the layout of your browser, your toolbar, your tools, and your tool tabs. And a workspace should be something that is comfortable for you. So let's take a look at it. I personally don't like my images on the right side. It doesn't really work for me. It works for other people, that's great. But for me, I want that somewhere different. And the images, the browser can be on the left, the right, or the bottom. And so let's go ahead and move that. What I'm going to do is come up to the top, and I'm going to take a look at View, and then I'm going to come to Customize Browser. Please notice that browser's checked right here. That means I can view it. Let's take a second and look at that, because if you hold Command or Control and press B, it removes the browser. Now this can be really useful because we should be able to see an image full screen and be able to examine it without distraction. So holding Command or Control B brings up the browser, Command or Control T brings up the tool tabs. So I want to move my browser to the bottom. That's where I like it. And I'm going to come up here, and we are going to, sorry, all of the stuff from Zoom kind of blocked my view for a second there. We're going to come to View, Customize Browser, Place Below. And that moves it to the bottom. Now, why couldn't I move it to the left? The answer is there's something already there. And so if the left panel space was available, I would have had the option of moving the browser to the left. Now, what if I want to move the tools over to the right side? By the way, little note, the tools cannot be placed below, left or right only. Now, if you are migrating into Capture One and moving out of Lightroom, where the tools are located on the right side, you're probably very accustomed to the tools being over there. There's two ways to do that. The first one is I could come to View, and I could come to Tools, Customize Tools, Place Right. But let me show you another way to do it. I can come to these three dots. Here's a little bit of nomenclature with Capture One. I can take any tool and take a look, and on the far right there's three dots, and those are the options I have for that tool. And I also have that for the tool tab as a whole. If I click on that, I get the option to place tools right. And there it is. And that's a perfectly great way to operate. I got into the habit a long time ago of using the tools in Capture One on the left for no particular reason, and that's what I tend to do. Now, before I look at customizing the tools, I want to take a look at actually customizing the way we view our images, because this impacts the way that you go through images and find what you're looking for. And I want you to notice at the bottom here, and in fact, I'll get rid of my toolbar just so everything's easy to see. Right there, you're going to see 3 icons. 1, 2, 3. These are 3 different ways of going through your browser. The one on the far right is the one that you've probably seen in other softwares, and it's a film strip. I can take my mouse and I can scroll through the film strip, but here's where it's really interesting. If I were to make my panel size larger, just click at the top, drag up, it doesn't show me more pictures, it makes the icons bigger. And that can be nice for finding a particular thing that you're looking for. Fantastic. By the way, little extra tip for everybody. If we come to the cursor tools at the top, one thing that I can do is come to the loop. And if you've used Capture One, you might have used the loop to double check focus on an image, but a lot of people don't know you can take the loop and check focus inside of a thumbnail. So you can actually check without even clicking on the image. Just a little extra thing for you. All right, so that is the film strip, but what if I want to see more pictures, not a larger icon? Well, that's what the icon view here is for. If I make this panel size bigger, I can scroll through more images as I operate. And this helps me find images really fast. So I'll use one or the other viewing mode just depending on the way I'm scrolling through images at the time. But what if the image I'm looking for, I wouldn't recognize it by the icon? I would recognize it by data. Well, that's what the middle option is. And here's my metadata view. I can find by name of image. I can see if it has a rating. I have other aspects of the way it was shot. And that can be particularly helpful when going through your images. I'm going to bring back up my tools here. And I want you to note the last major thing that we're going to take a look at with the browser, and that's the right side over here, which is actually searching within the album or smart album that you are looking inside of. And we're going to do some searches later. I just want to mention that this is actually duplicated from something somewhere else. If I come to the Library Tool tab, under Filter, we're going to see this little search bar here. Right there. It's the exact same one here. If I press these 3 dots, I'll bring up search parameter, and it will allow me to search within this particular collection, and I can do the same thing here. It's the exact same thing in 2 different places, just for your convenience. So that is searching through and managing your browser, being able to find stuff in a convenient way. But now I want to take a look at customizing tools and tool tabs. So let's do this a piece at a time. These are the tool tabs that Capture One gives you inside of your workspace when you use the pre-loaded workspace. And is it every tool tab that they've made? No. It's not. We could actually add some, but what actually are these? If I hover over them, it tells me that I can reorder them by clicking on Command or Control. I can click and then drag these and reorder my tool tabs, but it doesn't say what they are. Let's take a look. If I come to the 3 dots, it's going to have right here icons and text. It's a way of viewing the actual tool tabs. So now I get the icon and the text name. Now this takes up more space because the lettering just takes up more space, right? So I have these little arrows right here. If I click on that, it will show me the tool tabs that don't fit inside of the size of the panel. Now I could make the panel bigger, of course, but that is not necessarily an elegant solution. So we can have these named, or we can come back to icon only once you get accustomed to the way that they look. For right now, I'm going to leave icons and text turned on. But we take a look here and we see library, adjust, shape, style, refine, tether. This is not by any stretch of the imagination, all of the tool tabs available. And incidentally, if you looked at every tool that is inside of the preloaded workspace, you won't find every tool that's actually available in Capture One. So what I can do is come to the three dots and I can add a tool tab. And you'll notice some are gray, some are white. The gray ones are the ones that are already in my workspace. The white ones are the ones that aren't. We are going to be adjusting and working with the Quick Tool tab later on in our class tonight. Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see it. And that's me adding it in right there. Now I'm going to move it to the left, I believe, and I've got a little bit of a personal way I like to set this up. I like my tool tabs to be in the order that I will use them left to right. There's no reason it has to be. I'm just that way. So library, quick, adjust, and then I like to put in color, refine, export, and perhaps metadata. And you'll notice that I didn't mention the style tool tab. Well, the stuff inside of the style tool tab is great. We're going to talk about a lot of it here tonight, but there's only three things, and I can put those into other places. So I actually don't need this as a tool tab. Can I get rid of it? Absolutely. You can come up to a tool tab, right click, remove style tab. It's going to double check, hey, that's going to remove a whole tool tab. We can remove it because guess what? We could always add it back in if we so chose. It's no big deal. Now, that is moving, adding, and removing tool tabs. But can you tailor these or maybe create one that's entirely your own? And the answer is absolutely you can. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. If I come to add a tool tab, at the bottom there's a custom tool tab. What if you have a particular set of things you use in this order all the time and you just want those directly available? I know a lot of photographers who work that way. It's great. We can create a custom tool tab. We're going to create one just called class, just because, and we actually get the choice on what icon we have for it. We could number them if you wanted to just create your own. We get some cool ones like a little moon, we have a heart, a little kind of trowel there. So we'll just use the number 1 for the moment, and we're going to add it. And of course, this tool tab has nothing in it because it's custom, it's brand new. I want to show you ways to add and then subtract tools from a tool tab. So here we go. With any tool tab, not just one that you've invented, any tool tab, you can right click inside of an open gray space and it will ask you, hey, do you want to add a tool? Yes, I do. I'm going to add a histogram, I think. These are in alphabetical order. This is all of the tools that are available in Capture One. I'm going to add that right there. Is there another way that I could add a tool? Actually, yeah, there is. I'm going to come to my Adjust Tool tab. In fact, I'm going to make this bigger just so that it's really easy to see. This is way bigger than I'd actually work with, but just so it's easy to see. And you know what? I don't want style brushes inside of this tool tab. I want it inside of my class one, and maybe smart adjustments as well. I'm going to move those out. Come back to this tool tab, the class one, and I can just drag them in. They're inside of this. They've been removed from that. Works great. All right. What if I put something in here and I realize I don't want it? I don't want this tool in this tool tab. I want it somewhere else. No problem. In this case, we're going to come to the three dots next to the tool. Click on it, and we can just remove that tool. Gone. No problem. So we can add in tools in two different ways. We can remove tools. Now you've noticed me do something here that I do all the time when I'm working or when I'm demonstrating Capture One, or if I'm doing other things and just using Capture One for it, and that is moving tools outside of the panel. I find this to actually be a pretty beneficial way to work. Any tool, you can click on the gray space in between near the name and pull it out. And I can pop this anywhere that I want for easy access. Maybe you reference the tool quite a bit, or maybe you actually want it to be a little bit bigger. There are a number of reasons why pulling out a tool in order to have really fast or easy access to it might prove beneficial. But I want to show you one that I think really benefits from being removed from a panel and moved back in, and that is going to be the curve tool. Now we're not going to actually talk about using the curve tool tonight as part of this class, but I want to mention that this is a tool that's usually pretty small inside of a photo editing software, and I find that to be kind of a shame because you need to put specific points on a line that you might want to be very precise with your placement. And if the tool is very small, that can be hard, but we can expand this to really anything we want in order to do the adjustment that we want. And then I can just take the tool, pop it back in. And you'll notice I can put this in any order. I popped it in next to the exposure tool, but that's not where I normally keep it. I normally keep it next to levels, so I can click any tool and just drag it down to any other position I want. So we can organize these in any way that suits our particular needs, which is great. So now we've been able to move tools. We have been able to expand them, utilize them, add them, subtract them from tool tabs. But I want to take a look at one other aspect of working within a tool tab that is actually something a lot of people don't find. And once you find it, it's really beneficial. And that's going to be this. I want to take a look. I've opened up a bunch of tools here, and I want to access a bunch of them one at a time. And so that means I've got to scroll. Watch this. We have a black bar. Hopefully everyone sees it right there. It's in between. In fact, I'll collapse these so you can see them. The layers tool and the exposure tool. Notice there's a black line in between them, right? That is a bifurcation point in between the what's called pinned area and the scrollable area. All right. Now I've got a bunch of tools open. So if I want to find like vignetting, which I know is at the bottom here, if I scroll, notice layers and histogram don't move. They are always accessible. Those are tools I have deemed so important, I've pinned them to the top so that they're always there. I can always access histogram and layers in this particular case. Does something have to be in a pinned area, or can it be moved? The answer is absolutely. I can come to layers perhaps, and I can 3 dots and go to move to scrollable area. Now, I want you to notice where it put it. It put it at the very bottom. That happens when we take something from a pinned area and put it into scrollable, it drops to the bottom. But as you know, I could reorganize this wherever I want. Could something from the scrollable area go to the pinned area? Of course it can. 3 dots, move to the pinned area. And now it's right there. And it's at the bottom of the pinned area. That's where you'll find them. Let's take a look at the toolbar next. The toolbar is, let my Zoom stuff hopefully move back, is a selection of fast click tools to be able to double check something or quickly do some particular job. And there are a number of them, and you can have them in any order, and you can remove some and bring others back in. So let's go ahead and let's maneuver this around. We're going to go to View, and then we're going to go to Toolbar, Customize Toolbar, and it brings up this little dialog box. But there's another way that we could get to this. Inside of this toolbar, there's something that says Customize. It's right here. I'm going to grab that. I'm just going to move it into the toolbar. This is how we put a tool into the toolbar. Just grab it, move it in. Now I'm going to hit Done. But let's say that I'm like, I really want to adjust something on my toolbar. Customize brings up that exact same place. So now it's easy for me to manipulate this and get things the way I want it. What stuff do I deem absolutely essential in here? Well, undo and redo is essential. Copy and apply, essential. Reset, pretty useful. Before and after, pretty useful. And then I, from time to time, use grid. I use exposure warning. Auto adjust I don't use all that much. But you know what we want to add inside of here? Styles. Styles are great. And I find using the styles toolbar is a faster way to get to it and a better streamlined workflow, for me at least, than using the styles tool, styles and presets tool, that you can pop into your tool tabs. It's awesome. So I'm going to put that there. Now, I have personally an absolute obsession with making sure that my cursor tools, which is what this thing is, right? That's your cursor tools. I need it centered. And there's no reason it has to be. I just need it to be. So how do we maneuver some stuff in order to get things centered or moved around? Well, if I take any tool from up here, I drag it out and drop it, it just vanishes. So I can remove stuff like that. But now things have been altered. I don't like that as much. So what I can do is grab the space, which is always the same size, or these are called flexible spaces, which adjust size in order to make sure that all of the space that a toolbar could occupy is actually covered. Let's call that pretty good. So the things in the toolbar that are essential for me, copy and apply is a big one. I'm going to copy the edits from this image that has been on the screen, and I can come to another image, and I would be able to paste those edits onto that picture. That's how it's done right there. It doesn't have to be one at a time. It can be any number of images. They've been highlighted, apply the edits, and it will apply them. Simple as that. That is batch editing, and it's a wonderful way of speeding up your workflow. So that's one thing that's useful. The other one here that I use a lot is before and after. So let me come to just one picture. Here I've got it, and let's do something pretty obvious inside of here. Let me brighten this up way too much, just so that it's really easy to see before and after. I'm going to come up here, I'm going to hit before and after, and we're going to get before any edits and after. I can grab this and I can move it to see, has my work actually improved the photo? How much have I done? Here's why before and after is incredibly useful, but you don't need it in the toolbar. I keep it there, but you could also press Y on your keyboard, and you will bring up or take away your before and after view. So once we have our toolbar, our tools, our tool tabs, our browser, the way that we want it, that's called a workspace. And you should save your workspace so that you can come back to it regularly. Depending on what type of work I'm doing, I actually have two workspaces that I use regularly. There are two ways to be able to save it. The first one is up at the top, Window, Workspace, Save Workspace. But there's another way to get to it. The three dots on the right of the tool tabs also has workspaces at the bottom. It's right there. So you're seeing that I have, these are all the ones that are pre-built by Capture One. I have one that I call Basic Editing, and then I do some workshops here in Denver, and this is something I use for workshop reviews. Cool. I'm going to save this workspace. We're going to come to Save Workspace, and it's going to ask us for a name. Now here's a little trick for you. If you're just revising a previous workspace, come to the drop-down menu and choose the one you're going to save over. We're going to create a brand new one, so I'm just going to type class. This is our class workspace. And I'm going to hit save, and now I have inside of workspaces class. It's right there, ready to go. Great. That is managing your workspace so that things appear in a way that just looks convenient for you. And it's fun to fiddle around with, and I highly recommend fiddling with it regularly until you arrive at a layout that you really like. Now let's take a look at actually going through and managing our images. We will assume the images are already imported into Capture One in locations on your hard disk that you like. And the reason we're making that assumption is that's really the conversation of, a whole different thing. But we have inside of our Library Tool tab, the Library and Filter tools. So I'm going to open this up and let's take a look at what we're seeing here. I'm collapsing everything. Right here is actually where we choose what's the full thing we're looking at. There are catalogs and sessions besides what we're getting into at this point, but if you want to jump to a different catalog or a different session, here's where you actually get to it. Right there. All right. Oops, I accidentally clicked on that and I didn't mean to. Sorry. All right. Now below that we have catalog collections, user collections, and folders. What are those? Folders is where the images are physically located on your hard disk. When you use Capture One, you can and should use it for managing the location of data that is on your computer. It does it incredibly well between multiple connected external hard drives, etc. This is how you do it. But notice that that's the location of actual files. We're talking about finding images that are within Capture One, and that's what's called either a catalog collection or a user collection. So what's the difference? A catalog collection, you'll notice there's no plus or minus next to it. There is on the other stuff, but not here. The reason is the catalog collections are the collections that Capture One makes, and therefore it can't be altered. Inside of here, you will find all of your images, your 10 most recent imports, you'll find your 10 most recent tethered captures. I really only have 2 inside of here, and then your catalog trash. Now, I've been saying the word collection, but I'd like to take a second and make sure that that makes sense. A collection is a grouping of images that are somehow thematically linked, and it is in no way exclusive. I want to demonstrate that idea for you here. So I'm going to come to, this is from a vacation that I took last year to Hilton Head Island with my family, and that's my son Nathan. Now, is this an image that I would organize by images of Nathan? Is it family vacations? Is it Hilton Head Island? Is it beach? Is it ocean? I might have collections of images for all of those things thematically, or it could also show up in images from summer of 2022 or the year 2022. This image would reasonably fit into any of those collections. And so if you have collections for each one of those categories, this image could and should show up in all of them. In other words, an image can show up in as many collections as you want, but it can only be in one folder. And that's why we don't do actual moving through Capture One and working with images through the folder view. We do it through collections. So if catalog collections are the collections of images that Capture One makes, then user collections must be the collections of images that we make. And there are 4 things that we can decide to create inside of here. This space right here, the user collections, this is where you want to do as much work as you can to organize your images into ways that are convenient for you to find. This is where you spend your time. If I hit plus, I get 4 options. I get album, smart album, project, and group. So we're going to talk about these, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on projects. But I want to define what they are because it's actually pretty cool and it has some very specific usages. A group is basically a collection of collections. If we take a look here, I have education, because I do classes, family, friends, and something I call catalog management. And inside of each one of these are albums and smart albums. In other words, albums of images are then grouped together inside of groups, right? So these are thematically located. I can find images based on these general categories. You might do something similar, you might do years, whatever works for you. Now, a group is just taking any amount of albums or smart albums and thematically linking them together. A project is a little different. A project is a collection of albums and smart albums, but it only has access to images within the project. This is particularly useful if you use Capture One for professional workflow and you absolutely cannot have images from one client spilling over into the projects you create for another, right? We're not going to spend really any time on projects because they aren't used as often for people's personal workflows, but I want you to know what they are because they do have some great utility. So when we create a group, it just asks for its name and you drag albums and smart albums in, and that begs the question, what are albums and smart albums, and what's the difference, and why are both useful? Let's take a look. I open up my family group and I have 4 things in here. Nathan, pictures of my son, my wife and I's honeymoon in 2014, New Orleans 2019, and Hilton Head Island 2022. Now you'll notice the last 3 have a number next to them, 1451, 182, etc. Those are the number of pictures within those albums, but the Nathan album doesn't have that. Notice also that the icons are different. Nathan has a little gear with its particular symbol, where honeymoon and New Orleans and Hilton Head, they're just images stacked on top of each other. I'm looking at the icon right there. This indicates that this one says Nathan is a smart album, whereas honeymoon, New Orleans, Hilton Head Island 2022, those are albums. Let's talk about the difference. An album is a discrete period of time. Now, it's very hands-on. If I want an image inside of an album, I have to click and drag it in, right? I have to manually, in some way, move images into the album. But it is unchanging. Once images are in there, it is non-alterable. And so they're great for discrete periods of time. The only images I'll ever shoot in my life that I would categorize as Hilton Head Island 2022, I shot last year. right? And so this will never change. As a result, it's a perfect candidate for an album. Now, if they're manually put in, is there an easy way to actually organize things into albums? And there is. When you first import the images from a discrete event, remember, Catalog Collections has your most recent imports. We could grab those images, highlight all, and drag them into an album you create. Easy as that. Now, the Smart Album, let's go ahead and pull this up. This is a Smart Album of my son. This auto-populates because I've never done taking pictures of my son, right? It doesn't end, and therefore a Smart Album auto-populates images in. You can't drag and drop images inside of it. It auto-populates based on rules. So let's make one so you see what that's like. I'm going to hit plus. I'm going to create a Smart Album. Now, this is going to be our, let's call it best of 2022, all right? Because I want to show you integrating multiple rules. If this looks really similar to the search criteria box from earlier, that's because it's pretty much identical. Now, I could decide any number of rules that images have to follow in order to auto-populate. I'll tell you my favorite 3 here in just a second. But first I have the question, does something count? Does it get introduced into the Smart Album if it follows any of my rules or just all of them? We're going to do all just so you can see that interaction. But you could do any. It could be either something that is keyworded Bob or has 4 stars or whatever you want. So we're going to add a rule, just a plus right here, and I want it to be best images of 2022. So first it needs to be from the year 2022, and everything you see here, these are all things that are searchable by Capture One. If it's searchable, you can build a Smart Album or a search algorithm around it, which is great. Now we're going to come here to date is the year. Click on that. The date is on. Now I could say is not, is after, is before. You can tailor these. So this is the alteration tab. And I'm going to say it's from 2022. This is why setting the date in your camera is so important, right? But I want 2 rules. I don't just want 2022. I want it to also be my best images. So I'm going to create another rule, hit plus. I'm going to come down to rating right here. My rating equals 5 stars. And now I'm going to create it. So because I was highlighting inside of family, it created that Smart Album also inside of the same group. Is it movable? Yeah, you could just click and drag. But if I come here, I have 328 images that fit both rules. They're from 2022. They are 5-star images. You'll notice each one of these, if you look at the rating, is 5-star. Because it has to be in order to fit the rule. If I were to take one of these and I were to say, no, it's a 4-star image, it drops out. It leaves the Smart Album because it no longer fits the rule. So what are the 3 most powerful search engines to build your Smart Albums around? I'd like to tell you. These are the ones, at least, that I have found most useful for me most of the time. Let's go ahead. Actually, it's the same. Now let's go ahead and do it this way. Smart Album, test, just to have something. What are the 3 most useful? Well, you've already seen me do one of them, and that is rating. Rating images is one of the best ways that you can help yourself in finding your favorite pictures later. It's right here, and we can have a rating be nearly anything, right? Equals, is not equal to, is greater than, is less than, and then it's going to be 0 through 5 stars. Here's a little trick that I've implemented. I have in catalog management something that says to rate. This is a Smart Album, and the rule is they are images that have no rating. If I come to an image and I was to rate it, it drops out. And in this way, I know that I have a lot of work to do because I have to rate 59,000 images. You can see it right there. That is an easy way to build something that tells you how many things you have to rate. But rating your images is a great habit. We want to get into that habit if we can at all help it, because it lets us search for our favorite stuff. All right, what are the other 2? Come back to building the Smart Album. Let's just call it anything. The next one is going to be display name. Now this is the actual name of the file itself. So I'm going to come to Nathan here, and we're going to come to this view. That's the metadata view. I'm going to scroll this up, and you're going to see that these are named Nathan, and then the date that it was shot, and then a counter, all right? That is my naming convention when I bring in images. It's a job name and then the date. That changes the file's actual name. And why is that powerful? Why would we change display name? And I think that most of the time it's not necessary, but it's something you can do at import. And the second reason, hopefully, will never come up in your life. But here's what it is. Let us say that you have a situation that has happened to me. It's very rare, but it can happen, where your catalog gets corrupted. Very rare. And let's say it's even more rare that it's a catalog that's corrupted and you can't recover it and you have to build a new one. It's everyone's worst nightmare. It has happened to me. It's very rare, and fortunately it's unlikely to happen to you. But what if it does? And your images are named, DCIM 1234. How are you going to be able to easily rebuild smart albums? Well, you can't do it as easily, but if you change the actual image's name and the catalog goes away, the catalog stores your rating, it stores color tagging, it stores your albums and smart albums, but the name of the file is the name of the file, and you can rebuild things that way. So that's kind of a, insurance worst case scenario, but it is something you can do, and it's also really great for searching. My Nathan smart album only searches for images with a display name that includes the word Nathan. That's how I build it. All right. What's the last one? Well, the last one is keywording. Let me actually switch this back. Keywording is where you add a searchable term connected to an image. That's it. It's that simple. Let's come back to this right here. So this is, on my wife and I's honeymoon in 2014, we went to London, England, Glencoe, Scotland, and Edinburgh, Scotland. And now I have all of the images from that full trip in here, but what if I want to find something that's from only London? Well, we can do that. Notice over here I have keywords and keyword library. Let's go ahead and do this. If I wanted to add a keyword to something, like let's say this image here, I wanted to add the word castle to it. Well, I could come to keyword, enter keyword, and I could just type castle, hit enter, and it'll be added to it. All right. And you'll notice that this image has 4 now keywords: honeymoon, London, England, castle. Awesome. Well, let's now say that we want to find inside of this all of my images from Edinburgh, Scotland. All right, no problem. We're going to use the filter tool. The filter tool is amazing, right? We can search only for our 5-star images, no problem. I can hit X to clear a search. I can do color tag stuff, but I also have inside of here date, right? So I can search by date. I can also search by keyword. So I'm going to open this up, and I said I wanted to find everything from Edinburgh, Scotland, right? Here it is. Edinburgh is a keyword for 626 images. Just click on that, and there it is. What if I wanted only 5-star images from Edinburgh? Can I do that? Absolutely. Come back to the 3 dots. It's the same search bar that's over here, if you'll remember. Click on that, and now I can add searchable terms. And in this way, I can take a large selection of images and trim down to what I want. Now, here's the thing that you're all thinking, that rating images and keywording images is time consuming. And the reality is, you're right. It is. These are the most powerful searchable terms, but they take a little bit more work up front. The really important thing for me is the more effort you put into that at the beginning, the more time you save later. This is true of any photo organizational software. The more work you put into adding searchable terms, the better. Now, I could, of course, search by date. I could find images that were from, I was there in early July. I could find images from July 3rd, from July 4th, from July 5th, but it's 9 years later, and I don't know what date I was in Edinburgh versus Glencoe, right? So I could search by date. It's inside of there. But adding keywords will always be beneficial because that's keyed to the way that I think about searching through my images. All right. Now you should be able to set up your workspace how you want, organize your images in a way that you can find them, and do a little bit of homework in order to make your images even more searchable. And now I want to set up an easy way for you to be able to go through your images and start doing a basic adjustment. We want to set up a quick tool tab. And let's go ahead. what do I want to work on here? Let's go ahead and bring up some macro pictures, just because they're pretty. All right. So here's the Quick Tool tab as it's built in. This is a great thing to have because you can put just a few things and boom, 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 A, B, C, D, run down a line and do a basic edit. But I would augment these a little bit. So here's what we have: histogram, styles and presets, base characteristics, white balance, exposure, high dynamic range. So first of all, histogram is endlessly useful. It's going to give me information about if pixels are overexposed or underexposed. It's also one of the tools that benefits hugely from being expandable, by the way. Little thing for you. And I like to have that. I'm going to put it right at the top. Styles and presets, we're going to come to that later. I'm going to drag it down. Now, do I even need this here? Actually, no. If you remember, I have it inside of my toolbar. We're going to leave it in for the moment, but we actually don't even need it. We're going to put that there. Now, base characteristics. Base characteristics is something I actually do use. It's wonderful, and I think the best usage for it personally is when you make a custom camera profile with something like a color checker passport. That's something that I absolutely do. If I don't have that, I'm not utilizing this very much in other workflow. And as a result, I actually don't think it's necessary in a quick tool tab, even though it does have great application later. We're going to remove that. White balance, exposure, high dynamic range. I completely agree that all three of these should be in here. Let's grab an image that is unedited. Not a very good image there. Let's go ahead and do that one. Yeah. So here's an image, unedited, and these three things give you so much. First is exposure tool tab, and I want to bring up something that is not very well understood. There's exposure, there's brightness. What's the difference? It's actually a big difference. Exposure adjusts the overall, for lack of a better or different word, exposure or brightness of the image as if you had shot it at a different exposure value, one aperture versus another. So it globally adjusts everything brighter and darker in a way you would expect. What's brightness? Brightness is, in most instances, better, because what brightness does is it will increase the exposure, but only of midtone and shadow areas, and attempts to leave not highly saturated, overexposed areas alone. If you have sky, specular highlights, rim lighting, if you have any of those effects in an image, brightness protects your highlights better. This should, in most instances, be your default. Contrast is going to adjust the difference between light and dark areas within a frame, and most images benefit from a little bit of added contrast. And saturation is the depth of all colors, which you can go crazy with, of course. Now, we're actually going to do a little bit more nuanced color work in just a little bit. So I actually don't do much with saturation. I love this tool. It absolutely needs to be there. Now, high dynamic range, if you only used two different tools in Capture One and wanted to get the most out of the software, they would probably be exposure and high dynamic range. This lets me take my highlights and pull them down a little bit, take my shadows, open them up, and let me show you a little trick. Most edits benefit from taking up your shadows, brightening them up a little bit, but taking black and bringing it down, somewhere between -5 and -10. Not very much. Why? Color saturation depends on deep black and shadow. So taking your darkest pixels and making them a little bit darker improves your color saturation. And that's where we can do it. So you can brighten shadows and take down the black slider. Great. That has benefited our image, I would say, quite a bit. Here's before, here's after. Now let's take a look at white balance. White balance is something that, of course, we all know and love, and it's pretty basic the way that we use it in Capture One. I can take the image and make it warmer, I can make it cooler, and with tint you can add magenta or green. We can also, if we have a neutral point, grab our color picker and pick whatever we want and define that as our 18% gray point. And then I can click on that tool and bring it back. By the way, you don't even have to go to the white balance tool to do a white balance selection. If I come to my cursor tools at the top, I have a picker tool right here. Drop down menu, the very first one is pick white balance. Awesome, I use this all the time. So that has to be in here. But is there anything else we would add? Yeah, there's one more that I think really we want. I'm going to right click, add tool, and we're going to add the color editor. I love the color editor. Now there's tons of stuff inside of here that you can do, but we're just going to take a look at the basic tool here. And that is where I can just pick red, orange, yellow, greens, blues, and change their hue, saturation, and lightness. Let's do that with greens. I'm going to grab the greens, and I want their hue to be a little bit deeper green. I could go crazy, of course, but we're not going to do that. I'm going to increase maybe their saturation, but then I'm going to take their lightness, I'm going to pull them down. I'm going to darken those because they're in the background to push the flower forward. All right? And we can do that with just those individual colors. If you want to be more specific, that's what advanced is for. It's not harder to use, it's just more specific. I can grab a color selecting tool and select that color. And I'm only going to edit that color. I can change the range of colors that are near that color that I also edit with the color pie here. Do the exact same thing. This tool is amazing, all right? There's bunches to it that we can talk about, but those are the basic aspects. If we just had those things, we'd be able to do the vast majority of what most people want to do with an image. But let's add at least one more basic tool, and let's talk about contrast. I want to show you the absolute easiest way, the absolute easiest way to adjust contrast, and that is levels. Levels is amazing, and it's very underused. It simply remaps your brightest and darkest pixels to slightly brighter or darker values, stretching your histogram. Now I could take these and I could manually do it, of course, but let's just use the magic wand. If you don't know with the tool, if there's a magic wand right there, it does an auto adjustment. Click on that, and it does an auto adjustment. See how it brought in these values right there? It just remapped your brightest and darkest values to something a little bit brighter and darker to stretch your histogram. Take a look at the histogram shape. It's going to change. A little trick for you. If you hold Alt or Option, right here is the reset. This resets the tool, right? There's a magic wand to do it. There's the reset tool, right? But if I were to hold Alt or Option, I can preview resetting the tool. Little thing for you. All right, pop that back in. That's how I do most of my contrast adjustment. Now that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. The last thing we're going to talk about is going to be styles, presets, style brushes, and smart adjustments. So some pre-made, easy to use auto adjustment things. All right. Let's take a look at styles and presets. Now, what are these actually? Because it's something that's pretty cool. It can add a lot of speed to your workflow, and it doesn't need to be complex, right? But they are different. A preset is an adjustment made with one tool. Let's take a look at an example. I'm going to grab, let's say this image, not a very good image, but let's run with it. I'm going to grab my exposure tool. Now, the exposure tool has 4 sliders. With this image, I would probably brighten up. Now let's brighten it up with brightness, just in case some of those white areas would be overexposed. Let's add a little bit of contrast. Let's push a little bit of saturation. That is an adjustment that has been made using one tool. One tool can be saved as a preset. Now let's take a look here. If I have built-in presets, I'm going to pop this back in, come here, and built-in presets, there's bunches of these, right? I can do color balance, black and white edits. These are all things that are doable using only one tool. So if I wanted to use the black and white landscape, this is a preset, and it looks pretty good. There's bunches of these in here, and you very well might find something that just is exactly what you're looking for a particular effect. But we can save our own. We have the exposure tool. We did this adjustment. I'm going to come to the 3 bars right here, and I'm going to save this as a custom preset. What do I want to call this? Let's call this, first, it's asking, all right, of all of the tools, all the sliders, do you want to use all of these in the preset, or do you want to take the saturation out? You could. I'm going to save it, and now we need to name it. Let's call it, make it look better. And save that. And now if I come to an image and I want to make it look better, 3 dots, and I could come to make it look better. It's right there. That doesn't have to be something I access inside of the tool, by the way. I can come to custom presets, drop this down, and guess what I've got? I should have inside of here, under exposure, make it look better. Why do I have base characteristics, curve, exposure, high dynamic range? These are tools that I have made presets inside of. That's why just those ones show up, and they're the name of tools. Now, what if I have a series of edits that I've done, like this image, but I've used a lot of different tools? What if I want to save that? That's called a style. Now, if I come to styles, of course, I have built-in styles, and there's great ones inside of here. Some of the black and whites look really great. There's a punchy one inside of here. There's some cool film looks inside of here. You should play with them. They're really fun. But we can save our own, right? I can come, let's do it through the top, styles, and I could save this as a custom style, right? And it's going to ask me, this is called an adjustment clipboard. It's going to ask me, all right, you've done all of these things. Do you want all of them in the saved style, or do you want to maybe take your highlight adjustment out? You can choose that. I'm going to save that, and we can call it anything we want. Cool flower. And now if I come to an image, I could come to my custom styles and, oops, there it is. Cool flower. I could just utilize it. Great. So that is styles and presets. We can have them here. We can have them in the toolbar. They're awesome. All right. Let me take a look at my time. Running low. Want to make sure that I'm cognizant of that. Now there are actually two other cool fast things I want to show you. And we're going to add a tool here. And at the bottom we have style brushes. Style brushes are great. It's where you get to brush in an effect. All right. And let's go ahead and use one here. I want to grab, let's say this image, but I want to brush in it being darker, but only on the flower. Is there an easy way to do that? Of course there is. I'm going to come to light and contrast, and I have brightness negative. This is a brush. If I move my cursor, look at change, it's now a brush tool. If I right click, I can change it. I can make it size bigger or smaller. I can change the hardness. This is how it feathers out at the edge. You'll notice that that changes the size, the distance of that outer circle. All right. Opacity is how much you see through it, and flow is what we really care about. Flow is the building up of an effect. If I cap this all the way and I do something, I can draw a line. All right. Not very good. We don't want that with this particular tool. We want this to build up slowly. So usually a value for flow of between 3 and 8 is really good. Let's bring this down to like a 6. And now I'm going to take it, I'm going to increase the size, and I want the hardness really low because I want it to feather. And now I can start brushing in a darker look for the flower. But I don't have to be too careful with it because I'm building up the effect very slowly over time. That's before, that's after. Last thing I want to mention is smart adjustments, and it's the very last thing I would put into a quick tool tab. Now, smart adjustments, it's important to note, these are only usable with face detection. There's face detection AI running in the background, and it uses face detection to find the person's face, and then it tries to mimic an effect. In other words, copying an adjustment copies the slider that you did. But what if the next image is a slightly different exposure? Well, applying that adjustment is not all that useful. But smart adjustment runs from the other direction. Here's the end result I want. Do whatever you've got to do to get there. All right? We're going to show you an example of that, and I'm going to turn it over for what questions we have. So I'm going to come to, let's go ahead and grab the Nathan group here, and let's grab these images. Actually, I'm going to grab those. I'm going to reset them because these have been edited. That's the way it looked initially. All right, so here I've got an image, got face detection, looks good. I want to, and you'll see that I've done this before, I want to take a particular edit I have done. So I've edited this image. I want to set it as a reference. Now, the more that we see somebody's face, the better. So I haven't done this one as a reference before. See how well it works. I'm going to highlight a bunch of other images, and what I want is not the same edit to be applied, but the same end result. for the person's face. Now, if the series of images has different white balances and I want to leave them that way, I could take out the white balance matching or the exposure matching, but I'm just going to apply both because I need both of those to be done. And there it takes the end result and it finds face detection and it uses that to apply edits that get me to the same place. So that is the use of smart adjustments. It's an incredibly fast way of doing any of your portraiture style edits. And with that, I'm going to turn it over and see if there's any questions that I can answer.
Okay. Well, thanks, Joe. We do have some questions in the chat, and just a reminder to everyone that if you have any questions, now is a really good time to ask. I also had some that were emailed to me, so thank you, everyone, for sending in some questions. So first of all, we had a question earlier on from Vern, wondering about when you're going through your images, can you search by location, city, etc.?
So that's a great question. Let's go ahead. Sorry, water went down the wrong throat there. Okay. So with this, let's go ahead and interestingly, it's not something I look at all that often, and that's because a lot of cameras don't have location data inside of them. But if they do, let's take a look here. All right, so as I come down.
Oh yeah, we'll get you to share your screen again there, Joe, if you don't mind.
Is it not sharing?
No.
Oh, really? It stopped? Oh, I'm so sorry. My apologies,
That's
friends.
okay. That might have been. Yeah. Oh, there we go.
No.
Perfect.
Okay. Okay. Sorry. Let me go ahead and do that. So the answer is yes, right? But you have to add the data into the metadata of the image. So if you have cell phone images, it's location capable. Otherwise, we have to add it in. But if I come to my search bar and I come in here, we actually have several ways, right? So there's content. So if I have images there, but here I have the city, the country, the location, etc. So we have some ways of doing searches inside of there, provided that that data is part of the exit data of the image. So yeah, it can be done.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Question
Absolutely.
here from Michael. I've read that sessions are mini catalogs. So does that mean that that sessions are just like a catalog, but just mini?
So probably one of the most common questions regarding the workflow of Capture One is about the difference between catalogs and sessions. I use both, but let's talk about it because I wouldn't say it's like a mini catalog, but I'd say that they have a place in some workflow. Here's what it is. A session is a workflow of images that is discrete, right? And not just a discrete shoot, but it's usually thought of as a discrete input and output. So they actually have folders to them. When you create a session, it actually asks you to create 4 folders. There is the capture of images. Actually, let's go ahead and switch to one. I recently did a shoot. There is a wonderful store here in Denver that it's called the Autism Community Store, and they have a lot of support events and different types of things that are sold at the store to support families that have children with autism. I did a shoot of a low sensory bus that they have, and I did it as a session because it was a professional workflow. One series of images shot, I worked through it. So let's actually switch so you can see it. So here, and it says catalog, primary catalog, that's my primary catalog, session, autism shop, there it is. So we're going to switch over to that. All right, so it looks only a little bit different. But when I come to the library, notice that session folders are brought in. Capture, select, output, trash. Sessions are designed to be one workflow of images from beginning to end. They ask you to create 4 folders. You could actually name them different things. Capture is, here's all of my images, right? Selects are, here is my images that I have taken and I like these. These are the keepers. I could alternatively, something could go into the trash, right? So think of it as after capture, it goes to either selects or trash. Select says, here are my favorites, but I haven't edited them yet. So I'm going to finish editing them and then move them to output, which means that they're finished and ready for a client. And here's what is different about sessions. These are folders on your machine. All right, let me actually show you this. So here's my external hard drive of stuff. And if I come in to here, notice that capture, output, selection, trash, those are actual folders. These are live monitored folders. As you move images in, so with a catalog, it's not live monitored in the same way, but if I were to take an image and drop it in here, it would then automatically show up inside of the capture folder view in Capture One. Whereas with a catalog, I have to import it. So this is live monitored, and that's really great for constantly adjusting. It's a great way of having a single workflow of images. It is a great way of being able to manage the actual location of images, but you cannot divorce the location of physical images in sessions from their placement inside of session folders. And that is substantively different than catalogs. I use these for a lot of professional projects, but my primary amount of stuff is not in sessions, it is in a catalog. By the way, one little thing, let's say that you've done let's say that you have done a session, but you now decide, I really want that to be in my primary catalog. I don't want to switch back and forth because you're saying it takes a second. I can come to File and I can import a session into a catalog, and it just links to it. So hopefully that answers your question. Understanding sessions is wonderful and great, and if I didn't scratch the appropriate itch there, ask the question and say what I missed there. But hopefully that kind of answers the concept for you.
Awesome. Yeah, great question, Michael. So I had a few questions that were emailed earlier. So what are some of the reasons why you would choose Capture One personally over some other programs like Lightroom? Why do you like Capture One, Joe?
Sure. And as I answer this question, there's probably a lot of reasons why people use this software that are meaningful for one person and not for another. And also, as I answer this, I have used Capture One for about 10 years. I have done instruction on Capture One for, gosh, maybe 4 years, but I don't work for Capture One. That's not to say that that's bad or by any stretch of the imagination. It's just saying this is me coming to the software and coming to answering the question as somebody who uses this professionally while doing my other workflow. The first reason is actually one that I just like the philosophy of, and here it is. Let's say that a new camera comes out, right? The I don't know, the R1 Mark II or the A7R6 or whatever. And Sony or Canon or Nikon, they've made a new way of writing their RAW file. And it's going to be more intelligent, it's going to hold more data, but it's a different way of writing it. And let's say that I am a software company and I want to be able to read that RAW file. Okay, I've got two choices. The first choice is I can just go to Sony or Nikon or Canon and I can just buy the licensing and just say, I'd like to buy your coding for that so that I can plug it into my software. That's super easy. It always works. The other option is to pay nobody nothing and just reverse engineer that raw file coding. And Capture One does the former and not the latter. And that's why they have, over the entire time I've watched the software, been able to pull more data out of raw files than any other software that has ever competed against them. And the reason is, yeah, there's very, very smart people working for Capture One, but they also bought the win. And I don't care how they get the win. I just care that they get it, right? So that's thing one. You can pull more data out of raw files than any other software, and I can say that very explicitly because they buy the coding to be able to read the raw file. Also, if you've ever been using another software and a new camera comes out and you buy it the day it comes out and you're like, great, this is awesome, and my software doesn't read the files for 5 weeks. You have that situation.
Been there.
That's why that happens, right? Because that software company is feverishly working on reverse engineering the file. Meanwhile, when a new camera's coming out, Capture One has an update that reads that raw file usually a week before the camera launches. That's how. So that's thing one. Thing two is it's infinitely customizable, which I absolutely adore. And I also feel, and this is coming into a personal thing, I feel it's just straight up easier to use. I've used a lot of different softwares. I've taught a lot of different softwares, and straight up, I think this is a way more intuitive way of working with images than anything else I have personally worked with. And take that with a grain of salt because that's absolutely user experience. But you will be able to do an insane amount of adjustment and correction or fixing mistakes with Capture One relative to anything else. So those are my reasons, at least.
Yeah, and I can attest to that. I had been a Lightroom user for a very long time, and I was surprised with how intuitive it actually was. And I learned a lot from you tonight, Joe, with as far as the customizations go on where you can put things. So I'm excited to put that into practice.
Okay.
Yeah, so I have another question here from Tom. If you can share a few of your favorite keyboard shortcuts.
I don't use a lot of keyboard shortcuts.
Interesting.
I don't. And I'll tell you why. The reason is I teach Capture One, and you can't see my keyboard. And so I didn't ever get into the habit of using them. And it's just from that point. But let me mention a couple things here. The first is this class, we didn't have the space to be able to talk about masking. It's really its own conversation. But if I have, let's actually just create a filled mask here. So if I have a mask, right? So editing one part of the frame versus another, and I want to view it, you can press M on the keyboard to be able to view it, right? That's really great, useful. The other one is how much stuff you can do with the Alt or Option. So here's one. If I hover my mouse over the scrollable area and I scroll, I'm not adjusting or moving anything, right? But if I hold Alt or Option and scroll, I will adjust the actual adjustment slider that I've hovered over, okay? So there's actually a number of things that you can use Alt or Option for. Another one I showed you was if I adjust something, I've got the Reset button, hold Alt or Option, I can preview what it would be if I turned that off. Really super useful. That and then Y for showing the before and after. Those are really the only keyboard shortcuts that I use realistically. But that's mostly just because I don't do a whole lot with them. So a lot of people use a lot of keyboard shortcuts. I just never got in the habit. So not as satisfied of an answer for you. Sorry about that. That's the way that I operate.
Yeah, that's okay. Now you touched very briefly on styles. Can you explain how you would use styles and just a little bit more detail on them?
Absolutely. So there's two main usages of styles. The first one is a very minor adjustment, and the second one is a very major adjustment. Okay, and I don't really use anything in the middle. Minor adjustment might be this. When I shoot images, I absolutely need a couple things to probably happen with the images upon importing. The first one is a base characteristic, right? So I have a custom camera profile for my camera and I apply it when I import an image. And that is done with the, in fact, if y'all want to see, I'm going to switch. This is basic editing. This is my workspace. This is the way that I work. If you want to see the way that I do stuff, here it is. Bring that up. This is mine. And I'm going to come to only. All right, so here it is. So I use the color tool tab a lot. The base characteristics, I utilize the, I have inside of here, other, I create my own custom camera profile and I utilize that. And so I apply that whenever I import images. The other thing I might do is I might say, okay, I want to do an auto levels adjustment and I might take exposure up a little bit. So basic contrast, basic color space that you're working inside of, basic contrast. Those are three things that are pretty common, right? We do those a lot. You could save that as a style and then simply apply the way that you do a very basic edit, very, very small adjustments on the top of an image immediately. It's awesome. And it might just be all of the really essential things that you do up front. Now, another one might be something like the image we have here. This is a pretty dramatic black and white. I've gone black and white, I've pushed contrast. If I like my black and white images to look like this, I could save that as a style. And it could be my personal way of making a black and white image. Or perhaps you really like the effect of taking saturation down about 50%. Let it catch up with me there. Boom. Because there's kind of this really neat retro kind of vibe to the image when you do that. If you did this kind of a thing, you could save that as a style, and it could be your retro image, or you could build your sepia image or whatever, and that's what you like for it to work. And there's actually a shortcut to this, by the way. If you find a style and it is really close, right? Like built-in style, let's come to basic edit. Here's their flat contrast, but let's say that I wanted their flat contrast to desaturate a little bit. I could take this, I could take saturation, pull it down, and save that as a new style. So that's a shortcut to making it. So either some kind of big effect that you like, or a small selection of edits that you like. When you import an image, this is a cool thing. When we go to import something, we can look at this, look at adjustment right here. You can apply a style or preset upon importing, right? So if you build a base characteristic or a really small make it look better, you could apply that. Like I've got something called basic edit right here. I could apply that upon import to all of my images. And then my really essential editing is done before I even look at the pictures. That might be beneficial too. So
nice.
Hopefully
awesome.
that helps.
Yes, thank you. So I have a question here from Marshall, and this might be a question for you. If not, I know Liz is still with us. So Liz, this might be one for you to answer if you wanted to pop on. But Marshall says he already has the Capture 121 full license, and was curious to know what would entice someone to upgrade to Capture 123.
Okay. There are a couple things. The smart adjustments that I showed you, where it finds face detection and applies that, that's newer than 2021. And so if you want that feature, that's kind of where it's at. There's another one, and it's culling. We didn't talk about it today because that's outside of the essentials of what I wanted to take a look at. But I'm going to come to some portraits here. Culling is up at the top, and it's new as of 2021. And what it does is it takes all of the images that you have inside of an album, and then it sorts them into similar groups for purposes of quickly going through. And just this year, they added a face focus option. Now, I'm going to kind of riff for a little bit because it's waiting for it to kind of build its groupings here. But here's the way it works. It's going to pull images together based on similarity. I can decide if I want things to be really similar to each other, which is more groups, or if they can be a little bit less similar from each other and have fewer groups, right? And then the face focus thing up here pulls up a box that shows a zoom in of the face at a 100 or 200% zoom. And it's an incredibly fast way of checking focus, because if I'm going through my images of people, I am not going to spend any extra time looking at images that aren't perfectly in focus, right? I need to get rid of those. And so here is a really fast culling technique. We go to culling, right? We start looking at our group. So here is this lady, shot some pictures of her, right? And I'm going to come to here, but I'm going to sort by images that are not rated. just right there, because the filter search is here. I'm going to turn on the face focus and check this out. I can change the face focus to one of a couple different options. Now I want to do the viewer. Okay, so I can double check. It's trying to find the eye. Okay, and face focus 100%, 200%. Let's limit to the eye. There it is. So limit to eye, I can see it. And now I can say, is the eye even in focus? If it is, I could rate it, let's say, I'll put everything that is in focus as 5-star, everything that's not is 1-star, and then I only have to look at my in focus images. So here's 5-star, that's a 5-star. Let's say this one wasn't in focus, I can make it a 1-star. And see how they're dropping out? Ooh, I don't like the way that eye looks. That's a 1-star, it goes away. And in this way, you can sort through your images here by their grouping. Okay, we can cull them, we can double check focus, we can do a basic sort of them so that you spend no additional time. That's culling in a nutshell. All right, and Liz knows way more of the features that are most recent, better than me. So if you've got something to add in here, jump on, please. But the last one that comes to mind for me, and again, these are just ones coming to mind that I'm saying, okay, I think that's definitely newer, etc., is the Capture One Live, where you can shoot, you can work here and then share a link to be able to view your images inside of your workflow with somebody else. And all they need is a browser, right? They need to connect to the internet. That's it. They can do it on their phone, and they can look at the images that are inside of this set, and they can rate them, and they can color tag them so that you can share the images with someone else, maybe your client, maybe somebody you work with, and they can say, use this, don't use this. You're sitting at the comfort of your computer, and you can keep working. That is a new feature as well. Liz, if I missed something, let us know. Those are things that come to mind for...
No, you nailed it. Those were the top 3 things I would have said. So I appreciate you jumping in and sharing a little bit more about that. So thank you, Joe.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Perfect. And I'm going to drop the link again for this offer. Again, it's 40% off the Capture One Pro, the perpetual license for Capture One Pro 23. So this means that you end up owning it. And so it's a really great way. You're not getting a subscription. This is something where it becomes your software. You can have 3 activations. So it's really exciting. So I'm going to drop that in the comments right now so that you have it. And Joe, to wrap things up, I wanted to ask, can you tell us what the F stops here? Can you tell us a little bit about what that is about?
Sure. I'm happy to. Do you mind if I also say how people can find me around the internet?
Absolutely, yes.
Cool? If you want to find me around the internet, I have a YouTube channel that is mostly based around very fast bits of advice or learning about Capture One. Right, it's pretty much now all I talk about. It's Camera Lessons Online. So at Camera Lessons Online, it's also written out in the outline. So if you want to find me, I talk about Capture One. Come on over and let's chat Capture One. Okay, so the f-stops here, I am a full-time photography instructor and educational product creator. So I have a few educational products that are sold in a few stores, a few store chains that are on shooting guides. But Liz has asked me to build something for Capture One, and Liz, I haven't forgotten we've talked about that. It's on my to-do list. Don't worry, because I really want to build stuff to help out with helping people get acclimated to Capture One. I also teach online courses and in-person workshops for a few retailers in the United States, around the country. So I'm online teaching a whole bunches, which is what I love to do. So I'm teaching, I do tutorial stuff, I do workshops, I do product things, and talking Capture One is something I dearly, dearly love doing, so I'm very, very glad to be here. And this type of thing is the type of thing that I do. So yeah, that's me. That's what I do.
Awesome. Well, we're so lucky to have this session with you tonight, and there's been some comments. Marcy says this is definitely one of the clearest Capture One demos I've seen. So bravo. Thank you. Viewers appreciate it. And thank you to Liz for connecting us and creating this opportunity for us to share a little bit more of what Capture One can do, some of the essentials. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Liz, for setting this up and making this happen. You're amazing.
Absolutely.
Thank you to all.
Welcome. And I've put those links to your YouTube channel in the chat. So if you want to check out more of what Joe offers in terms of education, check that out. And then, of course, there's the outline earlier in the chat if you want to see some of the other links. But again, thank you so much to viewers for tuning in tonight. We hope that you learned something. If you want to see more of this live content, make sure that you subscribe and hit the like button so that we know that you like it. And, of course, we'll catch you again very soon.